Hi, this is Billie Beene here with a world news flash update. Today's date, August 13, 2024, time about 11 a.m. in Texas. World episode 195. Some of the things we'll be covering. Russia preps nukes for Europe. Radiation spike. And Israel. And the Sampson option. Some of my sources are God in the Bible, Patriot subscriber, Judge Napolitano, Scott Ritter, Larry Johnson, War News 24/7, BPEARTHWATCH, and Guardian. So let's get started. So we have this coming from New York Prepper that based on, this is Tuesday, approximately last Thursday is when NATO and Ukraine went into traditional Russia near the Kursk nuclear power plant and removed the defenses from Kiev into Russia. And I wondered, how did they get all 20 to 30,000 troops inside Russia when they had to go through this front line that's heavily controlled by Russia? Well, according to sources, the NATO Ukraine group put on Russian uniforms. And so they were able to penetrate into what's now being described as a very weak spot in Russia's defense because they had very few, they had no combat troops here. They had Russian police. So the NATO Ukraine group were able to penetrate inside traditional Russia, 30 kilometers or 19 miles. And it did take Russia about 24 hours to move troops from other parts of Russia. They did not pull any of their troops off of the front line inside Ukraine, but brought in troops to defend this Russian area. And it took them about 24 hours. So the incursion by NATO Ukraine happened about Thursday. By about Saturday, there were Russian troops there going for the pushback. But Russia also, we understand, evacuated, I believe, 76,000 troops from Kursk. They also evacuated troops from Belgorod for a total of about 180,000 troops. They moved back. Now, it's believed that that NATO Ukraine did have military objectives. One was to secure the Kursk nuclear power plant and use that land grab to negotiate an exchange for land in Russia for a release of land in Ukraine back to Ukraine. And there were other military objectives, but apparently there were civilians killed during this incursion into Russia by NATO and Ukraine. Now, Judge Napolitano today interviewed Scott Ritter. Kursk, there were strategic military objectives, exchange land for land. Kursk for the Donbass area right here. And the defense for Kiev was sent inside Russia into a weak spot of Russia's defenses. And the NATO Ukraine did come in Russian uniforms. We understand there are many dead Polish and French mercenaries, or possibly military for NATO, for France, and Poland. There are many dead inside Russia. And that also Moon of Alabama put the strength of the NATO Ukraine force that went into Russia as 20 to 30,000. So that's going on. So now part of the a diversionary tactic taken by NATO Ukraine was to set on fire the one of the reactors of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. Now, BPEARTHWATCH had brought this out, that there was a spike in radiation in this area. And BP was using the European-based example all over the U.S., all over Europe, and other parts of the world. There are nuclear sensors, and then they all report to a unified group and put out a report for a location. Example, just a few months ago, inside Texas, about in this area, the Panhandle, we have Pantex, which is a U.S. military nuclear weapons assembly and reassembly weapons plant. And I had determined when I was looking at the nuke sensors for the U.S. that the nuke sensors around the Pantex plant had been off for about 2 years, which would correspond with heightened activity there. And last year there was a nuclear incident inside Ukraine. I believe it could have been the transporting of what was described as suitcase nukes. And I looked at the censoring for Europe, and I could detect, and I was going into the search based on a report by another source, that there was heightened radiation detected inside Ukraine. So I verified that on the European nuke censoring site, and so that's going on. But then a few days later, when I went back to check what was the extent of the spike of radiation, those sensors had been turned off. Now, BPEARTHWATCH is bringing this out based on that recent fire in the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. There has been detected an increase in radiation in this area. And I will give this as a reference. So the nuke sensors measure in a unit sieverts, and a smaller unit per hour exposure. For example, our normal background radiation, 6 to 83 sieverts per hour. If you were in a commercial plane in the sky, you would be exposed to 2,000 sieverts per hour. So, yeah, it's good to space your plane trips out. That's why the astronauts going into space, they began using young men in their 20s, and they found out, based on their exposure to radiation in space, they all come back sterile. So after a while, the astronauts were aged 40 or so, men and women who had already had children. So radiation is real. Radiation effects, whether from the sun or from nukes or medical devices using nuclear material, it's all the same. So there has been a spike detected in this area, and as I said, our norm is 6 to 83 sieverts per hour. In a commercial plane, we're exposed to 2,000 sieverts per hour. This spike in this area of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant is 3 million per hour. So that's going on. And I'll link BP's a video on that. Very interesting. So now we have this. So Russia, in response, is bringing out more information on Russia's use of tactical nukes. Now, tactical nukes we had distinguished from strategic nukes, which are larger, but the tactical nukes used today are short range. That's the primary difference between tactical nukes and strategic nukes, is how far they can go, because tactical nukes carry as much or more power as the nukes that were dropped in Japan in World War II. So, tactical nukes. So Russia has had in place a training program to use tactical nukes, which they put in place between the years of 2008 to 2014. Apparently more information is being released now. They have 32 primary targets in Europe that they would, in Europe, and including the UK and the US, that they would bring to bear. Now, one of those locations that is on a list of tactical nuke targets for Russia is located in northwest England, Barrow-in-Furness. So that's going on. But we see information coming out now, and Russia's northern fleet that would be in this area would have the objective to use tactical nukes on the Scandinavian countries like Finland, Sweden, Norway, all the way down to Germany. So there are targets in those areas. The Northern Fleet would also hit the UK submarine base, Barrow-in-Furness. And Russia's scenario is coordinated with its partners China, Iran, Azerbaijan, and North Korea. And Russia would implement the use of tactical nukes if attacked by NATO and Ukraine and the Baltics or Poland. So, when Russia sees a coordinated attack against Russia by NATO and Ukraine involving Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and Poland, is an indicator that Russia would then implement a preemptive strike using tactical nukes, hitting Europe, the US, UK, with 32 primary targets, but they have hundreds of other targets they would also use. Now, The Guardian is reporting, we'll look at the Middle East, that the U.S. military is bringing in more assets. We already had the Teddy Roosevelt carrier. They're bringing in the Abraham Lincoln carrier. New York Prepper reported yesterday that they're also bringing in the USS Georgia, a nuclear sub. And we have this, that this is coming from this morning, interview of Judge Napolitano with Scott Ritter. Scott Ritter had a contact in Beirut. They were today to do an interview together, but the contact in Beirut today advised that they were evacuating the cities and going into bunkers. They anticipate an attack on Israel to August 14, possibly later today, and that it's believed Iran will launch 1,500 missiles at one time, which would result in the physical destruction of Israel. They're aiming for Galilee, Tel Aviv, Haifa, Adlat, a port, and that Hezbollah will use ground troops. They have 20 to 30,000 troops, Hezbollah does. In Syria, there are Syrian, Iraq, and Iran troops up to 50,000. So Iran would hit Israel at one time with 1,500 missiles. Hezbollah would also be bringing in missiles to overcome the Iron Dome. And there would be a mass use of ground troops, totaling, it looks like, about 80,000 at one time. And it's believed that if that occurs, Israel will move to its Sampson option, which means if Israel believes it is being overrun and overcome, it will use nukes and take itself out along with its neighbors. So it's good to be in prayer for the U.S. military. And once again, I'm hearing that the strategy for the U.S. military in the Middle East is to defend Israel, but not engage in offensive military moves against any of these other nations who may be attacking Israel. The U.S. military will simply defend Israel. So it's good to be in prayer for world peace and the U.S. military. I love you, and I'll see you soon.